So good morning to Professor Manu Vora, our Honorable Vice Chancellor Professor V.S. Rao, and our Professor Narendra Rao, the Pro Vice Chancellor of the SRM Andhra Pradesh University. Dear participants, this is actually I'm thankful to Professor Vora to accept our invitation, deliver a lecture to all of us to enlighten and also to be connected with this SRM Andhra Pradesh faculty and students community in future. So let me introduce Professor Vora. Actually, Professor Vora received his BTech honors in chemical engineering from IIT BHU 1968, MS in 1970, and PhD in 1975 in chemical engineering from Illinois Institute of Technology, Chicago, and MBA with marketing management in 1985 from Keller Graduate School of Management, Chicago. He is a past vice president of ASQ and an ASQ fellow. He has delivered over 1,170 presentations in 36 countries across 5 continents and has over 70 scholarly publications. Since 2012, he has written 50 blog posts on quality management. In 2013, he delivered 2 TEDx talks at IIT BHU and IIT Chicago. He received Tata Scholarship for graduate work in the USA. In 2016, he was appointed as Fulbright specialist by the US Department of State and completed his first Fulbright specialist project in 2018 at IIT BHU. Professor Vora actually is the chairman and president of Business Excellence, a global quality management firm with over 46 years of leadership experience in guiding Fortune 500 companies with the US Belbridge Performance Excellence Framework. For over 28 years, as an adjunct faculty, he has taught operations management courses at various business schools globally. He offered project management for organizational excellence, a GYAN course approved by the Minister of Education, Government of India. At BHU, he is connected with 680 educational institutes worldwide. In 2018, he completed his first Fulbright specialist project at the IIT BHU. Since 2013, he has taught soft skills using technology to over 1 million people. Professor Vora, a senior examiner for the Asia-Pacific Global Performance Excellence Award Program from 2004 to 2017. Professor Vora is bestowed with 5 medals from ASQ. He received 2018 NRI of the Year Award in philanthropy from ICICI Bank and Times. Now, Bombay, India, 2015 BHU Distinguished Alumni Award, 2015 and 2000 Paul Harris Fellow Medal from Rotary International, 2012 IIT Chicago Alumni Medal, 2011 Ellis Island Medal of Honor, and 2010 US President's Volunteer Service Award. Since 1989, Professor Vora is the founding director, 60th and president of Blind Foundation of India, and his team has raised over $5 million to serve 2 million blind peoples in India. So this distinguished lecturer at SRM University will be benefited with his vast experience working in USA, in India. A lot of collaborative work actually he has extended in AICT. Particularly, he also the advisor for developing advanced pedagogy course in NITO Chennai. Since then, actually, I have been associated with Professor Vora. And let us listen to him and enlighten our knowledge through the faculty as well as student community. I welcome again Professor Vora to deliver his talk on this career development guidance. Okay. Welcome to Professor Vora.
Okay, thank you, Professor Pandaji, for very kind introduction. Thank you, Honorable Vice Chancellor Dr. Rao, and distinguished faculty and all the attendees. It's my delight to be with all of you. And I want to share some of the good ideas about how to focus on developing our career so that we start early and keep planning it throughout our life and get the best out of it. So here is a brief outline. I will focus on 4 major pillars of success in your career plan and achieving the career plan. So the very first focus should be on planning. This is where we will look at Dr. Deming's cycle. Secondly, understanding our own strengths and then focus on strengths throughout the life so that we get the best results. The third pillar of success is around soft skills, which is so much in demand, and unfortunately the universities and colleges are not focusing on it at the moment in India, and so is true throughout the world. And the very last, fourth pillar of success is giving back to the society through community service. I have a couple of short YouTubes interspersed in the presentation, and at the end of the presentation, we'll request all of you to write down 2 key takeaways for your own career development, because that's one way to make sure that whatever you have listened, you are going to take some action on it, so you will benefit in the long term. So very first thing I wanted to share with you, the importance of planning. Whether it's your career, whether it's your studies, whatever things you are trying to do in life, the planning is one of the most important component. Now, here we can learn from Dr. Deming's cycle, and just for your information, Dr. Deming along with Dr. Juran were the 2 scientists who were sent to Japan by the US government after World War II, and these 2 scientists taught them quality management, process improvement, process management, etc. Since Japan had lost everything during World War II, they listened to this scientist and they improved the quality of their production. As a result, now they produce the finest automobiles and the electronics in the world. So the cycle has a 4 component: plan, do, study, and act. So planning is the very first component, extremely important. And once you have the plan, you have to start executing your plan. That's in the do area. Once you execute your plan, you need to study the results and make sure that you are getting the results as you have planned. And if there are any deficiencies, any shortfalls, you have to make some changes in the act part and continue this important cycle of continuous planning and execution. So the guidance is you need 10% excellent plan, however, 90% flawless execution. That combination will give you the success for your career as well as any activity you undertake throughout your life. Important to remember that planning without execution is futile. However, execution without planning could be fatal. And a brief comment about the planning situation at the India scene. I've been teaching in India since year 2006 at various business schools, engineering colleges, and I see a lot of time the focus on planning is not there. Things happen for happenstance at the last minute, and then people go from event to event without much focus on planning. But when things don't go well, you have to scramble. That's why it's important to do the plan, including your plan for the career. Because if you have planned your career, it will be much easier to figure out what next steps you need to take, how well you can execute it, and are there any difficulties so you can overcome them. Now let's go to the second thing. The second focus of the success area, second pillar of success for your career development, and that is all about understanding our own strengths. Now, it so happens that a lot of time throughout our life, we keep doing things Ultimately, towards the retirement, we find out, oh, these are the things I was very good at, and I wish I could have done more of it. So here we can learn from the Gallup organization's theory of strength. And the Gallup defines strengths as the ability to consistently provide near perfect performance. The ability to consistently provide near perfect performance. And this applies to your career plan. This applies to your own way of working with various things. Now, strength is defined as a multiplier of talent, time investment. And graphically, you look at the strength in the middle. 3 bubbles at the top are the talent, which is thinking, feeling, and behaving. And 3 bubbles at the bottom are the investment by building up your skills, knowledge, and the experience. Now, I'll give you a couple of examples. A ping pong player was spotted by the coach, and he found out that he was very good with the forehand stroke. So he decided to give him so much extra practice without worrying about the backhand stroke. Since he was working with his strength, he won the world championship. Focus on strengths and don't worry too much about the weaknesses. Make sure that you manage them so it doesn't come in the way. Secondly, if you have young children who are in the schools or colleges, they bring the report card, 5 subjects, 3A, 1B, 1C. Normally, when you sit down as a parent with the child, focus will be on C all the time. The theory of strength is exactly opposite. You need to discuss 3 A's to ensure that A's will remain A. Most likely C will never become A, but you can give some additional resources so C may become B. So focus on strengths and make sure that you are managing the weaknesses so they don't come in the way of strength. Now, Gallup organization, which is a marketing group, are very active during political season. Here, they do sampling and project who will win, who will not win, etc. And they wrote a book called StrengthsFinder 2.0, published in 2007. So they studied people from around the world and came out with a 34 major strengths and wrote a book, StrengthsFinder 2.0. So if you really want to understand your own strength, you can buy this book. It's available online also in India at amazon.in, and it's reasonable cost. And what you need to do is buy a new book. At the back of the book, there is a sealed envelope with a code in it. Using that code, you take an online test. And at the end of the test, when you hit the button for the results after taking the test, you get your own 5 major strengths with the explanation. I'm sharing with you my top 5 strengths. First one, I'm an arranger, more like a conductor of a symphony. I see all the variable pieces, arrange them so that the beautiful symphony music comes out. Secondly, I'm an achiever. I have an inner drive that keeps me moving. Third, I am a learner. I get energized to move from the ignorance to competence. Fourth, I'm a maximizer. Look for excellence first from myself, then from people around me, and the average doesn't work for me. And the 5th major strength is I'm a relator. Once I come in contact with people, I start building relationship. Now, Gallup wrote another book called Soar with Your Strengths. There's a humorous sentence in that book. Let me read it to you. It says, you don't teach a pig to sing, it annoys the pig and wastes your time. As we all know, pigs are not very good at singing. If you poke them or provoke them, they will make funny noises. But this is what we do in life. When we have people working with us, we always try to find faults and look for where they have done something wrong, rather than focus on what good things they bring on the table and what strengths they possess so that they can do well for the organization. So always remember, focus on strengths and manage weaknesses so it doesn't come in the way. So the guidance from the career development point of view is First, understand our strengths and leverage them throughout the studies and in the career, so that when you play with your strengths, you're able to deliver the great results without not much of the supervision required. And each one of you have a unique 5 major top strengths. And what do you do with it? Once you take the test, you put it down on your curriculum vitae or resume just below the objective, my top 5 strengths. You list them. This will open up a conversation with the interviewer, whether you are going for a promotion or a lateral move. And you can answer the question how your strengths help you achieve better results in the current or the previous positions you have held. Extremely important concept of understanding our own strengths so that we do well working in the strength zone. Now I'm getting into the third pillar of success, that is the focus on soft skills. So before we dive into it, let me share with you the World Economic Forum Future of Job reports. 10 specific skills needed in 2022 left side versus 2020 on the right side. The 4 items have been ported back from 2020 into 2022, color-coded in different positions. So if we really reflect on the left-hand side, what critical skills are needed to be successful in global arena, you will find out that a lot of these skills are not taught at the colleges and the universities. And as a result, when people graduate, they do not have the life skills or the critical skills needed to be successful in the global marketplace. So important to reflect upon this and try to include them as a part of the curriculum. And I'll make that pitch again for the other soft skills as well. So here I wanted to bring up importance of soft skills. Again, based on my own personal experience since 2006, interacting with brilliant students in India, unfortunately, they only focus on the hard or technical skills, and they choose not to focus on soft skills much. And of course, the curriculum doesn't include a lot of soft skills, so they are deprived of the critical life skills they need to have in order to be successful. So latest surveys shows that more than 90% of the executives who are looking for new people to be joining their teams, their organization, they are asking for better soft skills. And the last bullet is very important, that for the employers, new hires, they need to have a better ability to work in a team, more desirable ahead of problem solving or technical or analytical skills. So as we see here, soft skills are important and critical. Unfortunately, as I mentioned, the colleges and universities do not focus upon it, and they are not part of the curriculum. They should be part of the curriculum so the students get the exposure. Using those soft skills and life skills, they can do well at the university and colleges, find a better placement, and able to make good progress once they find a good placement. Now we'll start peeling the onion, various soft skills. We begin first with the communication. Here, very instructive to understand that no matter what job we have in life, the success is determined 5% by the academic credentials, 15% by the professional experiences, but lopsided 80% by our communication skills. And you have to fill in the blank other soft skills such as leadership, decision-making, time management, teamwork, problem solving, project management, etc. And we are going to cover each one of them very briefly at a higher level. Now, there are 3 components in the communication: verbal, written, and presentation. And by the way, in the verbal, non-verbal also counts. When you are having a verbal communication, non-verbal body language is very important. So each of those 3 components have to be effective, have to be concise and clear, and you can be proficient with the practice. Now, I'll give you a couple of short examples. The one is there was a highly technical place with people having 25 to 30 years experience. A new person joined who was technically okay, but extremely good with the soft skill and ability to get work done working with the people. So within 1 year, he got the promotion. So all the people who were there for a long time, they got worried and met the manager. Manager sat all of them down and told them that, look, all of you techies, I can hire any one of you dime a dozen. But to find a rare combination where the person has a good technical understanding, but more than that, have much better soft skill and ability to get work done working with the people. As a result, he's getting the promotion. Secondly, while we are going to be in the team situation and make sure that we understand that in real life, either you are at the university or in the workplaces, the success come through the effort of the teams working together. And while you are in a small team of about 6 to 7 people, you may have a lot of great ideas, but if you cannot communicate them across the table, those ideas will not be heard and it will remain as an idea and you will be disappointed and you will feel bad about it. So keep working on improving the communication. This should be the lifelong pursuit. We can all improve our communication. And last thing I wanted to mention, when I was at Banaras Hindu University, which became the 16th IIT back in 2012, during the 4 years, I was technically very competent. I was a rank holder, but I was very shy, very introvert, and I was hesitant to speak to the group of 5 to 6 people. Once I came to the US, I realized that unless I speak, nobody will understand what I have to add value to. And I had a great mentor at AT&T Bell Labs who taught me how to open up and start having a good communication with the audiences, large or small. And as a result, now after 53 years, and again, as a faculty, you have to pay me to stop talking. So it's all matter of practice. If I can do it, all of you can do it very well as well. Let's move to the next item. So after communication, we need to think about decision-making. It's a skill we need to master. And here I'm sharing with you a simple tree diagram, which came from Japan, one of the quality management tool. And here the example I've taken is not the right one during the COVID pandemic that you want to go on vacation. But when the situation improves, I'm sure there will be a lot of demand to go on vacation. That's your highest level decision 1. It will allow you to look at decision level 2, more options. And then for each of the item at decision level 2, you have decision level 3 opening up, leading to specific outcome. So here you can see on a single piece of paper, you can put a lot of information and then travel the journey from decision level 1 all the way to the outcome by selecting a specific path. So at a glance, by looking at all this information, you are able to make a decision with a specific outcome in mind. So this is all about decision making. Now, this applies to the selection of the branches you have made. Now, a lot of you are in the engineering branch. Some of you may have the business branch. I had chemical engineering as my major. However, in my final year, I took petroleum engineering as my minor. In business, I had marketing management as my specialization, but you can have accounting, finance, strategy, IT, etc. as your specialization. Some of your students may enter into medicine, some may enter into law, and again, there are many more sub-branches within each of these disciplines. and some of your friends and others may be good in fine arts, liberal arts, life sciences, pharmaceutics. So the original decision you make to select a branch will lead ultimately to some meaningful work. Now, a lot of you who are the faculty chose to become the educator, but some of your students will become the entrepreneur. Some of them will join the corporate, some will join the government organization, some may decide to work for the NGOs or join the R&D labs. Now, in my case, I worked in the corporate sector, first in the chemical industry and then in telecommunication. I'm an entrepreneur since 2000, but I'm a social entrepreneur for the last 51 years, managing number of NGOs. We'll talk about it shortly in the fourth pillar of success in giving back. I'm also an adjunct faculty, so in the education area, and not directly worked for the government, but mentored and taught the government officers from Egypt and Turkey and Inner Mongolia from China here in the US about various aspects in terms of project management, talent management, etc. So this decision-making, again, selection of the branch leading to meaningful work. Now, may I request all of you to remain kindly muted? I hear some noises. Thank you. Appreciate all of you go on and mute. Thanks again. So in the last century, the 20th century, we needed 3 critical skills, and those were reading, writing, and arithmetic. In the 21st century, we need to have those 3 skills as given, but we need to pick up 3 additional skills. And these skills are teamwork, problem solving, and project management. So teamwork, problem solving, and project management are additional 3 critical skills we must master so that we will be successful in the global marketplace. Now, here on the effective teamwork, I would like to share with you wonderful work done by Patrick Lencioni. He wrote a book called 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. So as we mentioned, when you are working on a small team of 6 to 7 people, the role of the team leader is to ensure that none of the 5 dysfunctions are present in the team. And if they are present, you need to remove them so that the team will start working very cohesively and achieve the tasks for which the team was chartered in the first place. So the very first, the dysfunction is the absence of trust. So let me populate 5 dysfunctions and we'll talk briefly about them. Second one is the fear of conflict by creating artificial harmony when you are discussing critical issues. Third, lack of commitment because of the ambiguity. Fourth, avoidance of accountability by having low standards by the members of the team. And fifth, inattention to results due to status and ego of the team members. So let's touch back again. So the very first thing, the team is only functional when each member of the team can trust each other. And how do you develop the trust? You need to be vulnerable, to share your strengths and weaknesses. And here, the theory of strength will come in handy. We talked about Gallup organization work. Secondly, when there is a discussion going on critical item in the meeting, only few people out of 7 will speak. Others are keeping quiet by creating artificial harmony. Ideally, everybody should be providing input on critical issues, and with multiple inputs, then you decide using a funnel approach by identifying most critical item to be working on, and then everybody falling behind to give 100% support. So do not create artificial harmony. Create the constructive conflict in the meeting setting and try to come up with the best idea to work on and find the right solution with the help of the team members. Third, when the task or subtask are assigned by the team leader, the team leader should be absolutely clear, crystal clear about what is the assignment given to a person. So with that clarity, there is no ambiguity and person can commit to resolve the item assigned to them and work on it. Fourth, when the task and subtask are assigned to the members, hold them accountable for results because their input along with others' input will become the final solution for the team. And if one or two people are not providing input, then the entire team will be delayed and the result will be suboptimal. And the last item is sometimes people may have a better title or better position and they get carried away with their status and with their own ego. They forget why the team was chartered in the first place to achieve some results by solving a problem related to customer operations, organization, etc. So you need to be equal member of the team and provide the necessary outcome based on whatever tasks are assigned to you. And that is to show the importance of that item. So this is all about teamwork. Now, what is a team? A team is many hands and one mind. So when you put everybody's hands together, it becomes a brain. And that's what the team is all about. And the team is as powerful as everybody contributing for the success of the team. Now I want to segue into the time management, sharing with you the Eisenhower box. There are 4 quadrants on the y-axis, important or not important. On the x-axis, urgent or not urgent. The key thing to remember that the top right quadrant, where we need to spend 90 to 95% of the time working on important but not urgent things. So most important items, doing the planning, doing the training, preparation, touching base with the stakeholders. When you do great work, then take some appropriate time out to recharge your battery. The top left quadrant, important and urgent, you need to only spend 5 to 10%. That's the firefighting, get it out of the way. Bottom left, not important and urgent, delegate it to others, where you need to focus on your own thing, top right quadrant. And bottom right quadrant, not urgent, not important, delete it altogether. By doing this prioritization, what we are doing is focusing our time on working on the right things so we can achieve the results day after day after day and get the team to be successful, organization to become successful. So I came across a beautiful definition of time. So let me read it to you. Time is slow when you wait. Time is fast when you are late. Time is deadly when you are sad. Time is short when you are happy. Time is endless when you are in pain. Time is long when you feel bored. Every time is determined by your feelings and your psychological conditions and not by clocks. So have a nice time always. So that was about time management. Next, we segue into problem solving, another critical skill for the 21st century, teamwork, problem solving, and project management. So in our life, either as an engineer or a business people, or even as a faculty, we'll be called upon to solve problems throughout our life. So this is a fundamental 6-step process we all need to master. First, properly define the problem. Now, I'm an engineer. A lot of time I've worked on finding some solution without paying much attention on the problem. And then I'm hunting for what problem I solved. And that's a wrong approach. When you are trying to solve a problem, take time to properly define what is the problem. when you do that due diligence up front, you have started the journey for problem solving. Secondly, determine the magnitude of the problem using the data available to you. Third, determine the root causes. What is causing the problem? So you need to get to the root of the problem. And this is very similar to when you see beautiful lawn, a root, you will come up with a weed which is growing in a beautiful lawn. In order to remove the weed, you don't take it out from the surface. You pick it out with the root taken out so that the weed will not come back. And that's why important to find out what's the underlying root cause, what is causing the problem. Once you identify those root causes, then try to find some possible solutions which can reduce the root causes or eliminate them altogether. And then those solutions, which is either removing the root causes or reducing it to keep it to a very minimal level, you make that solution permanent and try to get ready to tackle the next most important problem you want to solve. So as you see, it's not a rocket science. Simple 6-step problem solving method we all need to master because we'll be using this throughout our life, both professionally and personally. Next come the most important item, that is project management. Now, the research shows that world over only 25 to 30% of the projects are successful and rest fail. Kindly don't raise the hand at the moment. Your questions will be taken in the chat at the end. Thank you. In order to achieve better success from more than 25 to 30% all the way to 100%, there's a beautiful article from the MIT Sloan Management Review that the project leaders need to overcome the 5 crises of silence. So which are they? First one, the team must be planning around the facts. The project team must plan around the facts. Secondly, the project sponsor must provide support through the life of the project. Third, the project team should be faithful to the project management process, which requires doing the planning, preparation, execution, and closing of the process on the project. Fourth, the team should be honestly assessing progress and the risk. So if you are in a project team, every week there should be a status review. Quickly find out where everybody is on an assigned task or a subtask. Use some color coding. Green on target on the task or a subtask, achieving the goal. Yellow, likely to miss. Red, you have missed the target for that week. And during the status meeting, you find out how many people have missed the targets, and offline with the help of project sponsor and also the team leader, project leader, figure it out what resources to be given so that the team can remain back on track and the project moves forward. And the last, all members of the team must pull their weight. So in other words, 6 to 7 member project team, if 1 or 2 members are slacking off, their output will be delayed and others will have to pick up the slack and tension will rise and the overall results will be suboptimal. So all members of the team who are selected based on their skills and talent, they must work together to achieve the success in resolving the issues, bring the project home within budget, on schedule, and meet all the performance requirements. So this is all about project management, extreme critical skill we all need to master throughout our life. And particularly project management should become the part of the curriculum so that students are exposed to it. They've experienced doing some projects in team, not solo, and then also continue to advance in using the project management discipline when they are at the workplaces. Now I come to the last item in the soft skills area, change management. So initially, the decision we make as a student or a professional at a given point in time will keep changing because of the new circumstances. Our dreams can change. We'll come across many different experiences. And if we are flexible with our decision making, and if we are prepared well, when the new opportunity knocks on the door, you can take advantage and move from one area to the other area seamlessly. And here I wanted to share with you my personal story. So I was very good with chemistry and mathematics. So that's the reason, using my strength, I decided to become a chemical engineer, which was natural fit. Taking chemistry and mathematics to understand how to develop industrial products using the chemistry, that's a chemical engineering. So I enjoyed studying the chemical engineering and worked in the field for 7 years. And then I was in the chemical industry. There was a downturn in the industry here during the energy crisis. I was doing my MBA and then got picked up by AT&T Bell Labs in New Jersey, about 800 miles from Chicago, where I am currently at. So I changed from chemical engineering to telecommunication. Within 1 year, I was on a special assignment for quality management, quality improvement, quality planning, and that changed my entire career. And then I started teaching whatever I was working on and the total quality management at the business schools. And around the time, I've also started working with the lots of NGOs, including one of my own, Blind Foundation for India. I'll briefly mention about it in the fourth pillar of success of giving back for the community service. And currently enjoy working with many educational institutes throughout India to share whatever I have learned in my lifetime so that students and faculty can be empowered and they do well for their life. So the change is the only constant and we need to be ready. And they say that if you are prepared and if you are ready, then when the opportunity comes, you can take real advantage and be at the front end of the curve for the change. Now I'm trying to focus on the very fourth pillar, the community service, giving back to the society. And the best way to do it is to share with you my 2 live cases on the service case for the healthcare and the education sector. So in the healthcare, going back to 1989, we are on the 33rd year with the formation of the Blind Foundation for India, USA, free gift of sight project. And then for the last 8 years, soft skill program in India, which is a free gift of knowledge. And I'll share highlights of both the case studies very shortly. So before we get into it, I want to share some quotes on giving. So here is a British author, Albert Pine. He says, what we do for ourselves dies with us, but what we do for others and the world remains and is immortal. And this is the essence of life. Next, Pericles, the Greek statesman and a general, he says, what you leave behind is not what is engraved on your stone monuments, but what is woven into the lives of others. How many people have you helped throughout your life? And I think that's your real contribution to the world. And the last one, Maya Angelou, American poet, she says, when we give cheerfully and accept gratefully, everyone is blessed. So giving is a very important part. In India, we have a tradition. Unfortunately, we focus on giving to the temples, but I think we should be focusing more on giving to build the lives of the people through education, through healthcare, and uplifting the masses so that they do well throughout their life rather than deposit money in the temple only. I'm not saying you don't give it to the temple. Give it to the temple, but major portion should be spent on the living being who needs help in terms of education, in terms of health healthcare, and whatever social work you can do to uplift them, which is most important. So let's take the first case study, the Blind Foundation for India, and genesis of these. I'll share it in a brief video, but let me give you the highlight of our foundation. Back in '88, I came to know that India had 15 million blind people, 1 out of 3 in the world. So 1/3 of the blind population is in India. Dr. Rajendra Vyas, then Honorary Secretary General of National Association for the Blind, was visiting with us, and he opened our eyes. He says, in India, there are 15 million blind people. We were about 1 million Asian Indians at that time in 1988. So he said, do something for our less fortunate brothers and sisters. So we started this foundation back in April 1989. The website is shown here, blindfoundation.org, and we are now in the 33rd years of the dedicated service, serving over 2 million blinds, 1 million adults, and 1 million children. Our mission is very simple: to prevent and cure blindness. Prevention is through vitamin A, and curing blindness through removal of the cataract from the elderly. And the second part of the mission is to provide education and rehabilitation to permanently blind people in India. And we have provided Braille kits to blind children for studying with the sighted kids, and helping blind people to learn something so that they have a livelihood and they can support themselves. So as I mentioned, staggering statistics: 15 million blind in India, 1/3 of the world blinds live in India. 2.3 million people develop cataracts every year due to age-related issue, and 2 million blind children, only 5% of them receive any education. Now, here are some results so far for the Blind Foundation and its impact. Over $5 million raised since '91. We have, with the help of our medical partners throughout India, 230,000 free cataract operations. 1 million adults got free eyesight checkup. 1 million children examined for their eyesight, given the glasses, vaccinated against measles, and provided vitamin A. And in some rare cases, they got the cataract removed. 10,000 Braille kits given to blind children. Donated 135 mobile vans in 19 states of India. Using this van, the medical partners take the doctors and nurses to the villages, hold the screening camp, isolate the people who need the cataract, and bring them to the hospital base using the same van at a designated date and time. After the cataracts are done, they are taken back on the van to their villages. All of it is free of charge. And working with the Rotary International, we have done 15 major projects on a match basis, where we raised $1, it became $3 with the Rotary matching, and overall $500,000, $5 lakh came through the Rotary matching. So almost 1/10 of the funds we have raised came from the Rotary Foundation. Share with you very briefly some of the honors received because of the Blind Foundation for India work. This is one of the very prestigious medal given at the Ellis Island in New York. That's where all the immigrants from the Europe landed up at the New York Harbor. And we had about 1,000 people in the ceremony. About 100+ people from different ethnic groups were recognized for their outstanding community service work. And I want to share with you a short video which essentially brings together a focus about the Blind Foundation for India. And this is when I was honored with the ICICI Bank and Times Now NRI of the Year Award in philanthropy category from the North America. So let's quickly view the short YouTube.
Welcome back. You're watching the Times Now ICICI Bank NRI of the Year Awards, powered by the Global Indian International School. We're in conversation with the winner of the NRI of the Year Award in the philanthropy category for the North America region, founder and director of the Blind Foundation for India, Manu Vora. Sir, your efforts at the foundation have led to the prevention, cure and rehabilitation of over 15 million individuals that are blind and of Indian origin.
Right.
What's made it possible?
Yeah, so my journey in this area started back in 1959 when I was a young student and I had a very freak accident with a firecracker. So at the Diwali time, I was playing with a firecracker. One of the cracker had not gone off. So I took that cracker in my hand, being naive, didn't know, put a puff of air, and lo and behold, that firecracker exploded on my face. So I had a third-degree burn, and my eyes were closed, so I was totally blind. And within 24 hours, fortunately, the eye doctor was able to remove the residue, and I was able to gain the eyesight. Now, while in those 24 hours, I was pondering what is my life, because I had lost my parents by the age of 6, and no parents, no eyesight, I had zero future. So that happened in 1959. 30 years later, we started a Blind Foundation for India, when Dr. Rajendra Vyas, he was the Honorary Secretary General of the National Association for the Blind from Mumbai. He motivated us to do something for 15 million blind, whereas we were about 1 million Asian Indians in USA. So that is the start, and this is how the God works in a mysterious way. Planted a seed, 30 years later, it germinated into a foundation, and coincidentally, we are in the 30th year of the foundation, supporting our blind brothers and sisters back home.
What a phenomenal journey, sir.
Thank you.
Now, 1/3 of the world's blind population is of Indian origin. That figure is very discouraging and very daunting. So how do you embrace this challenge and tackle it head on?
Yeah. So we came to know that the 80% of this blindness is preventable or curable. So if you take a children age 4 to 6, they go blind because they don't have vitamin A in their diet, and mainly in the villages, and as well as the elderly people who are sitting in the villages, they have a cataract due to age. Their children don't want to spend any resource to get the cataracts out. So they are needlessly sitting there as a blind people. So our effort is to prevent the blindness through vitamin A to young children. Cure is by removing the cataracts in the villages for the people. Education, we have given braille kits to the children to study with the sighted kids, and rehabilitation to get them some jobs so they can earn their own living and make them self-sufficient. And some of the things we have been doing for the last 30 years is creating a trust with the donors. We are totally transparent. We have a website, blindfoundation.org. People can go and take a look at it. We have volunteer organization. Nobody is paid a single penny. And we get all the volunteers to help us to manage the foundation. We have done so far 200,000 free cataract operations, 10,000 braille kits. We have given 128 mobile vans to take doctors to the villages and bring the patient back for cataract. And so far, on an overall basis, 1 million adults have their eyesight checked free of cost. And about 900,000 children, mainly in the government schools, their eyesight subject to prevent them from going blind.
You're transforming lives. And so there's of course no substitute for the gift of vision. What can others do both within India and NRIs outside of India that are looking to rally behind this cause?
Right. So I think the issue is twofold. One is we need to be aware. I was not aware when Dr. Rajendra Vyas came. He told us and he opened my eyes that so many blind people, and also the impetus is 80% is preventable or curable, and it takes only small amount of resource to help our brothers and sisters back home. So people can open up their purse and donate, and also reach out to the communities within each of their residence areas to make people aware that this is a serious challenge. Whatever we do little by little, it adds up and it becomes a big thing at the end of the day. And there is one stanza in Sanskrit, Tamso ma jyotir gamaya, God kindly lead us from darkness to light. Now, if we take it on a metaphysical level, God kindly lead us from darkness of ignorance to the light of knowledge. And my simple request to all the NRIs around the world is, India has invested in us so much in the early education. Wherever we are sitting in the world, we can give back our knowledge, and all the NRIs who are settled, they do not need money. The institutions need to have supportive administration, which will make it possible for the alumni to give it back, the knowledge, the talent, their time. And that is the order of the day.
Sir, as a recipient of this highly prestigious, coveted NRI of the Year Award, what does it feel like?
So first of all, I want to thank Times Now and ICICI Bank for coming up with this kind of program, which essentially exposes the good work done by NRIs around the world. So hats off to both the entity. Second.
So that was briefly about Blind Foundation for India work. And the honor is for doing the work, not at a personal level. So here the Minister Kiran Rijiju, he was with the Ministry of Home Affairs at that time. He was the chief guest giving out the awards. Now I want to segue into the second study, Gift of Knowledge Using Technology, the Leadership Excellence Series program. Now, as I mentioned before, because of the lack of focus on the soft skill, our students don't do well, except few who do understand and work on it. Most of the students are neglecting the soft skills. So we started this 12-topic series called Leadership Excellence. 6 items in blue are the soft skills like leadership, teamwork, time management, meeting management, decision-making, project management. And 6 items in red are quality management, discipline, risk management, talent management, voice of customer management, operation excellence, supply chain management, and sustainable change management. So the pilot was started at my alma mater, IIT BHU, with the help of the training and placement officer, Professor Anil Kumar Agrawal ji. And one session a month, about an hour and 15 minutes, 45 minutes slides, then half an hour question and answer. In those times between 2013 to 2016, Google Hangout was free, so we used that as a platform and recorded all the session on YouTube and made it public. And it's shown on the link here with the American Society for Quality, link shown here. And in the year 2013 to 2016, we were able to reach 6,75,000 people. And currently, after last 18 months of doing a lot of online work during the pandemic, we have now reached out to 1 million people, students, faculties, and professionals on these 12 sessions. And now it has been narrowed down to 5 sessions: the leadership, decision-making, time management, teamwork, and project management. So here I wanted to share with you the power of technology. So in the top right picture, Swami Niklesharanandji, who was with the Ramakrishna Mission in Vadodara, he has now moved to Rajkot Ramakrishna Mission as a Adhyaksh. Sitting next to him is Mr. A.J. Shah, Commissioner of Higher Education, State of Gujarat. So Swamiji took me to Gandhinagar, capital of Gujarat, at the BISEC studio. Through satellite connection, we connected with 450 colleges where 500,000 students, 5 lakh students and faculty benefited on this important topic of effective time management. It's been professionally recorded and the YouTube link is shown here. And I'll be sharing this presentation with Professor Pandaji. and feel free to share it with everyone who is interested and who signed up for the program. Now, I want to share with you a focus about going forward, what kind of scaling model we need to think about. So I had a chance to work as an international advisor in Egypt, where a brand new university was going to come up in Alexandria in Egypt. And I had done some work in Egypt during 2008 to 2010, training the government officers on the human resource management and the change management. Now, Egypt, like India, has issues of unemployment and underemployment. So they wanted me to develop some soft skill program which can be taught to students in the brand new university with 4 different colleges: business, engineering, medicine, and pharmaceutical. So I put together the coursework for items on leadership, communication, research method, quality methods, community service, entrepreneurship, and soft skills. So along with the core subjects, they need to study these 7 areas on soft skills and life skills, more like a bring up the portfolio approach. And for these 7 areas, they study both theory and also work in the teams to do the live projects. They get graded. And in the end, after 4 to 5 years of that program, these 7 areas, they create a report card, and they have to achieve 80% overall passing score so that they get the degree. Without that, they cannot graduate from the program. So when they go for a job interview, they take the report card with them and show it to prospective employer that we have understood these life skills and we have exposure to it, and they will get the preference over those who have no exposure to these life skills. So the bottom line is, when you master your soft skill, you master your destiny. I think this thing we need to keep drilling in our students' mind and also in our faculty, that first the faculty should become proficient in soft skills, and they need to continue to deliver soft skill to the students so that in addition to the hard or technical skills, they are becoming very proficient in both sides, hard and soft skills. Happy to share that our knowledge transfer using technology project was recognized with the DL Shah Quality Award at the silver level by the Quality Council of India on 20th of August 2016 in New Delhi at the 11th National Quality Conclave. And I was delighted to receive IIT Chicago, my alma mater here, alumni medal, the highest award given to an alumni for outstanding technical as well as community service work. And summing it up, giving back impact since 1989, very happy to report that able to raise $12 million in the free gift of knowledge in the last 8 years. 1 million people have benefited, 10 lakh, and a free gift of sight, 2 million or 20 lakh adults and children have got the free eyesight checkup. So here are some of the recommendations I'm bringing it home: benefits of community service. Now, this is one of the critical area for all our Indian colleges and universities, where we need to ensure that our students are doing some community service, giving back to the society. So I was looking at the website on Habitat for Humanity, which is the organization started by former President Jimmy Carter. And this group essentially builds the low-income houses and give it to the people who have no money to buy the houses to stay. Now, the community service helps connect to the community by understanding significance of helping others in need. And also it helps improve the community by making it a better place for everyone. It benefits your career prospects. When you are working on the community service project, you build up experience and life skills such as communication, planning, teamwork, problem solving, task management, working with adults, etc. Community service also raises social awareness. It broadens our horizons by helping understand the needs of the society surrounding the organization and the institutes and the population you are trying to help. Community service establishes contacts and friendship. This is the easiest way to make friends through the activities you perform together and have fun by doing that. And community service help you improve your skills. Students are advised to do community service to get work-related knowledge and skills, including the time management. And also it increases their chances of success in finding a good job due to their community involvement, and also helps you get some good references for potential employers. So a lot of good benefits of community service. Now, here is the bottom line. So one of the new emerging area FDP, Faculty Development Program for AICTE Atal Academy I had suggested was importance of community service. And this is why it's so important that we focus on this. So if we assume that if we ask our students in all higher education institute to do at least 2 hours every weekend for 8 months when the college or the university is in session, they will be doing 64 hours per year per student. 250 million students in higher education institute will lead to 16 billion hours of community service work. And I've been interacting with some of the coming up faculty development programs at various places, and some of them are putting together a 2-credit course of doing 100 hours per year per student community service compulsory requirement for graduation. And that will lead to 25 billion hours of community service work. And this is a huge untapped potential available for nation building. And the way to do it is we need to, and in the next slide, I'll mention the structure which you can build up at the colleges and universities for community service, which is so critical. And this we can reflect back on our old days of Gurukul system, where whether you are a king or a common person, each one of them had to do all the chores at the Gurukul, equally take responsibility along with the studies, and help keep the environment safe and serve the community where they were in. Now in the US, there is a requirement at the high school level that if they do community service, they have a better chance of entering the top colleges or universities here for their undergrad and graduate program. And my both sons did between 300 to 400 hours of community service work total in 4 years of their high school. And elder son got into Stanford, younger one at University of California at Berkeley, and the older one went for MBA at Northwestern, and younger son went to 1 year at the London School of Economics as sabbatical. Because they had done the community service, it was an important component of getting admission at the top schools, university here. And the way to do it is we can have a faculty and students going around the community, do some survey, find out what the needs of the community are, and then create a project to address those needs so that students will be able to work in a team under the guidance of the faculty and try to solve some real life challenges and the problems of the community, add value and help in the nation building. Very, very critical and important component for the universities and colleges. So here is a project structure I am suggesting, that appoint one faculty as a champion per institute. Also include an alumnus and industry experts in the project, because industry expert can bring some CSR funds as well. And when you include the alumnus and the industry expert, use their expertise and experience if they have a good proven track record with results and they have a positive can-do attitude and they are willing to volunteer, that's the right team you can put in place, like Brahma, Vishnu, and Mahesh. So faculty, alumnus, and industry, 3 people working together to spearhead the community service projects for your institute. As I mentioned, do the survey, talk to people, determine the needs of the community surrounding the institute, and create appropriate projects in some of the suggested areas just as a starter. You can have more areas: education, healthcare, water, sanitation, agriculture, elder care, orphanages, food banks, etc. Leverage CSR resources through the industry experts, engage with the area NGOs, and set up quarterly review for community service project and their progress using the project management discipline, and widely share outcomes of your community service project at the institute and recognize the high achievers. This simple project structure will allow you to do this effort on a systematic basis and add great value. And this will go a long way in nation building by engaging students and faculty rather than student wasting their time over the weekend. At least they can serve for 2 to 2.5 hours every weekend. Now I'm trying to bring it home, except one beautiful YouTube, motivational YouTube. So here are success factors. Now, as a student, if there are any in the audience, show respect to your faculty, excel in both technical and soft skills, be socially responsible, and if you are good at studies, mentor other students. Is very fulfilling and satisfying. Since most of the audience is the educators, we must renew our knowledge, because unless we are at a cutting edge, how can we give that cutting edge knowledge to the others? We need to engage our students and become a role model. Need to balance theory and practice. Do not give out solution to the students, but encourage students to think by providing them resources. And if you are there for a while, and if you have a good experience, mentor other educators who are coming through the life. And if any of your students want to become the entrepreneurs, they can be a dreamer, find out new ways to create innovative products or a service for which somebody will pay. They can learn from other entrepreneurs and mentor other budding entrepreneurs as well. So now we have a beautiful YouTube, highly motivational by famous football coach from University of Notre Dame, Lou Holtz. So let's listen to that and enjoy, and there are beautiful messages to take home.
I was born with a silver spoon in my mouth, I know. I was born in Fallsby, West Virginia. And I went by where I was born last night, about 10:30. I was born in a cellar at home, delivered by Dr. McGraw. We had one bedroom for my sister, myself, and my parents. We had a half bath and a kitchen. 7.5 years we lived in that place. There was no welfare. There was no food stamps. There was no safety net. But I always had plenty to eat. Because every time I asked for seconds, my dad would say, no, you had plenty. But the reason I was born with a silver spoon, my dad had only gone to the 3rd grade. That's all the education he had. But why was I born with a silver spoon in my mouth? Because I was taught by my parents that life's a matter of making choices, wherever you are, good or bad, because of choices you make. Don't blame anybody else, but if you get an education, you're willing to work and overcome problems and difficulties, in this great country, you can amount to something. That's why I was born with a silver spoon. I was in this country and I was taught personal responsibility for choices you make. And when we talk about a commitment to excellence, that's a choice you make. What do you want to do? Having hopes and dreams and ambition. See, I think that is absolutely critical. Don't make the mistake I made. I've done a lot of dumb things, but let me tell you the one thing I regret. We went to the University of Notre Dame. We took a program on the bottom. We took it to the very top. And for 9 straight years, we went to a January 1 bowl, the sugar, the cotton, the orange, or the fiesta. Nobody's done it before. Nobody's done it since. We put it on top and we maintained it. That's the thing I regret the most. See, there's a rule in life that said you're either growing or you're dying. The tree's either growing or it's dying. So's grass, so's a marriage, so's a business, so's a person. Doesn't have a thing to do with age. My birthday candles cost more than a cake. But it has everything to do, am I trying to get better? Am I trying to prove? We got on top and say, you know, this is pretty good. Let's maintain it. Let's not take any risk. We finished second in the country at Notre Dame. Everybody called me an idiot. Guy finishes last in medical school, they call him doctor. That doesn't seem fair. When I left Notre Dame, I never thought I'd coach again. Where'd you go from Notre Dame? According to my mother, you go directly to heaven, you sit by the Pope. You don't coach anymore. And then I went to live in a town where the average age was deceased. And what I found out, I wasn't tired of coaching. You have to have something to hope for, something to dream. And even though you've done great things so far, what's going to happen now? I want to give you a simple plan. Life doesn't have to be complicated. I try to keep life simple. Do you realize there are only 7 colors of the rainbow? Only 7. Look what Michelangelo did with those 7 colors. There's only 7 musical notes. Look what Beethoven did with those 7 notes. There's only 10 numbers. Look what Bernie Madoff did with those 10 numbers. The point I make is it doesn't have to be complicated. See, you need 4 things in your life. If you don't have any of these 4 things in your life, you're going to have a tremendous void. See, everybody needs something to do. Number 2, everybody needs someone to love. Number 3, everybody needs someone to believe in. In my case, is Jesus Christ, our Lord and Savior. But the 4th thing you need in your life is you need something to hope for. There's never a right time to do the wrong thing. And there's never a wrong time to do the right thing. Just do what's right. I think it's right to be honest, right to be on time. See, ladies and gentlemen, enjoy life, have fun. You're going to have problems, you're going to have difficulties. That's part of life. And don't tell people about your problems. Do you know that 90% of the people don't care? And the other 10% are glad you got them. So you're better off keeping yourself. You're going to have problems. But have fun with what you're doing. People say, did you have fun doing the ESPN? Not really. Because if you have fun being there, people have fun being around. Doesn't mean I don't do dumb things. And sometimes I wasn't real honest. Do everything to the best of your ability with time allotted. You know, ladies and gentlemen, not all of us be All-American. Not everybody can be first team. Everybody can be the best you're capable of being. And I want to tell you, if you want to fail, you have the right to fail. That's what's great about this country. You do not have the right to cause other people to fail because you don't do everything best your ability. When you join a spouse, you bring a child in the world, you join a business, you join a team. You have obligation, responsibilities, and you owe it to other people to do the maximum you can at each and everything you do. It's not complicated. And the last rule, to show people you care. And you walk in the room, your attitude, hey, here I am, look at me. It's like, no. Your attitude, there you are, how can I help you? I wish I knew those 3 rules when I was 21. I've used them for the last 40 years. There's a statue of me at Notre Dame. I guess they need a place for the pigeons to land, but if you go look at it, just don't look at 3 words on the pedestal. Trust, commitment, love.
What a beautiful message and uplifting and highly inspirational, motivational talk by Lou Holtz. So recommendation for career success on the 4 pillars. Create your career plan and execute it flawlessly. 10% plan, 90% execution. Secondly, first know your strengths and then leverage their strengths throughout your lifetime. Third, master your soft skill to master your destiny. And fourth, give back through community service, which will help in nation building. So in summary, chase excellence, then success will follow you. Remember Nike's motto, just do it. In India, we have a tendency to keep doing the debate. And when the debate is over, ground is cleared, there's no one left to take the action. They've shifted to next big debate. So let's not worry about a lot of discussion and debate. Some is needed, more focus on execution, project management, etc. Patience, persistence, and perspiration makes an unbeatable combination for success. And at the end of the day, expect nothing and appreciate everything. So as I mentioned at the beginning, that you should be writing down your 2 key takeaways for your own career development. And today, once we are done with the question and answers and the comments, we'll look forward to see at least one of your key takeaways on the chat. That way, at least whatever you listened for the last hour and 15, 20 minutes, you're taking something back with you. So that will help you in developing your career. With that, I'm going to stop sharing and we are ready for questions. And once again, I want to thank Professor Pandaji for a very kind invite to share some of my thoughts with all of you who are present in the program. So back to you and ready for questions through the chat box.
Thank you very much, Dr. Vora, for that very inspiring talk. We would like to kindly request our Honorable Vice Chancellor, Sir Dr. V.S. Rao, to say a few words. In the meanwhile, I would like to request the attendees to please post any questions they may have on the Q&A box or the chat box. It's preferable in the Q&A box, and then we'll take it from there after our Vice Chancellor, Sir, has spoken. Thank you.
So at the very outset, let me express our gratitude on behalf of SRM University to Professor Vora for this excellent, inspiring talk, which covered several aspects for success. More than anything, what really inspired me is what we can give back to the community. The way, I think if I correctly recall, 1 million blind people, okay, and 2 million knowledge skills that you have delivered is really commendable. Our salutations to you, sir, for these 2 excellent initiatives. Further, you have correctly concluded by saying that you just do it instead of discussing for a long time in the boardrooms or in the other areas. By the end, there is nobody to do it. This is what I think in India, we must all remember, that we should concentrate on doing it. At the same time, you have also mentioned, you plan it. In the initial thing you mentioned, you plan it correctly, then execute it. So the success is, I think, if I correctly recall, 10% planning, and I think 80% execution is important for the success. Many things that you have mentioned are very, very appropriate for working professionals, for students, for faculty, and for organizations. So I am really personally enlightened, okay, having sat through the entire talk, listening to you. So I'm really delighted and enlightened. Thank you once again.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you for your very kind words.
Any question, answer? Any question? So, Okay, then some questions are there.
There are some key takeaways.
The couple of people have posted some takeaways in the chat box. There is, we don't see anything in the Q&A box as of now, but I'll just reiterate for the attendees what is there in the chat box. Sir,
Dr. Balaguru Prasad, sorry for intervention. I just forgot to mention one thing that you were referring to. We are planning to introduce community surveys, okay, on a credit basis, and soft skills on a credit basis from the next academic year onwards. We have been deliberating for the last 1 year after I've joined. We have done this at NIIT University in Imrana. So for every student, it is essential to register for 1 credit of community service and also for co-curricular activities for development of soft skills. So thank you for that suggestion. We will certainly take it forward. Thank you, sir.
Great. Yeah.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Now some questions are coming up, so I would like to pass it on to Dr. Anupama to take care of the Q&A session at this point.
Okay.
Hello, sir.
Hello.
I think this is from Ram Thakur. He says, what works better with the present day learners, reward or punishment? He says, I tried rewarding my students and only 15 to 20% showed interest. And then I threatened them with poor grades and 95 to 100% responded. So his question is, what works better? Do we have to reward them or do we have to punish them?
Yeah. I think the fundamental issue is you first need to create an atmosphere where they are eager to learn. So first you need to engage them in the classroom. Unless they are engaged, no matter how much punishment or how much reward you give, outcome will not be there. So we need to think about first engaging them by showing them real world application, why this topic is important. And you do your homework first and then engage them by asking them to do relevant work of figuring it out why this topic is important, do some quick learning, come back, do some team formation, small teams, and give them chance to discuss and come back and share it with the class. So that is the fundamental base. Once you have that, ensure that the students are picking up on what you are delivering. So this is more like a transmission issue. So you as a faculty are a powerful transmitter, but if the receiver is not well tuned and the antenna is not in place, then whatever knowledge you are transmitting is not going anywhere. So that is the first item to consider. And then ensure that you leverage the students who are learning well, ask them to help others who are not getting the bottom line or who are having difficulty, connect them in the small groups and use them as a more like a role model. And then comes the question of punishment or the reward. I would focus more on the rewards, because if you recognize few people who have done well, that will be more like an inspiration for others to do better, to shape up and do well for themselves as well. So I will leave it at that. Punishment we have always done, but it just does so much. So instead, let's focus on strengths, build up their strengths, find out what is causing them not to learn. And you have to put extra effort as a faculty to do this. So this is not just a routine thing. When somebody is creating mischief or not learning well, find out what is the underlying root cause and try to find a solution for it. And you'll be amazed, those who are troublemakers can become the great students because they have so much energy, they are just misusing it on the wrong way. Let's go to the next one.
Yes, sir. There is another question. How we can face the challenges when there is a change in our career?
Yeah. So first is preparation. So whatever career you have currently, try to learn everything you can, master things, including the soft skills. Also, the people skills are very important. So if you notice those people who are getting promoted either at the institute level or in the workplaces, are the one who have the great ability to connect with others, work with others, leverage everybody's strength and find the solution. It's not just individual at that stage, it's the collective effort which will bring the success for the organization. So you need to open up and to start collaborating, cooperating, sharing your ideas with others, and lifting people up rather than pushing people down. So that is the best way to move forward. And change in the career, like I went through many changes, chemical engineering to telecommunication to quality management. At every juncture, there was a sort of setback in a sense. I had to take extra effort to learn new things, pick up the new discipline, work on it hard and master it, and then keep creating new areas where I had interest. And if you are inquisitive, if you are curious, if you are willing to learn, the opportunities are many. So we need to take advantage of that change when it comes along.
Okay, can I move to the next question, sir?
Yeah.
There is a question about how the soft skills course can be part of the curriculum. Can it be made like a core paper or, a credit course?
Yeah. So as we listen to Honorable Vice Chancellor, he mentioned that one credit course on the community service, one credit course on the soft skill, etc. And I'll give you one more example at the Great Lake Institute of Management in Chennai.
The virtual certificate prepared.
Yeah.
Okay.
Go ahead, Professor Rao. Professor Rao?
No, not myself. I think somebody else said.
We are muted now, sir. We are muted.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So what I was saying, at the Great Lake Institute of Management in Chennai, they have a compulsory Karma Yoga course. So they've adopted 22 villages surrounding the new campus near Mahabalipuram. Every weekend, 1-year MBA or 2-year MBA students are bused to those villages. They work in the community on a community service projects. It's compulsory for requirement to get the degree of MBA, and they have to write up a project report, present it, and they get graded. And this is one way to inculcate put the seeds to the students while they are in the formation stage, how to help the communities, how to start giving back. So when they move up in the corporate world, they will have more resources to help others in need. And that's the requirement should be that the university creates a compulsory course for the community service, soft skill, etc. Give them enough exposure by working in the community, working on the real life projects and real life problems. It will make them so much more proficient, start thinking about helping others. So that is one way to do it. And people are doing it. I was at one of the FDP as an observer from AICTE at Maharishi Dayanand University, where they are talking about 100 hours of community service per year by all students required in a 2 credit hours, 2 credit course. Every year they have to take it. Yeah, so the examples are there. We need to make it uniform throughout India because the potential is huge, as I mentioned. Anywhere from 16 to 25 billion hours of community service work can be done if we are consistent and if we are focused on doing this nationwide.
Okay, thank you, sir. And it's the other question is, the next question is on community service as well. Satish from VIT University, he wants to know, is there any team for community service that he can join? And in that case, how to contact them? And he has another question as well. What is your view on today's education? What we need to do to build a better world?
Yeah, so in terms of the community service, I think it's up to the institute to start this project work I was describing. And If you are interested, you can look up Great Lake Institute of Management. They have this Karma Yoga project. They will be happy to share that information. And at your own institute, you can start doing some of these activities by going around in the communities surrounding your institute. And that will definitely help you to get started, engage your students and the faculty to do some good work to help others. And the second part of the question was, once more time, Anupama ji.
Yes, sir. He is asking your views on today's education, what we, and in terms of policy and home environment, how we need to build a better world.
Yeah. So once again, sorry to say, we are wedded to the old British system where people, the students are mugging up and vomiting. So they just mug up things, memorize it, and then spit it out in the exam. Retention is zero, knowledge is not retained, and then they have to work hard by hook or crook. They get a job, and then they have to start over. So I think outcome-based learning is very critical. We need to think about changing the way we are assessing the outcome of the education. I'm happy to share that I've just put together a simple article about innovative pedagogy and assessment for effective implementation of NEP, National Education Policy 2020. It's getting published in the Higher Education Forum, work coming out as a booklet next March. And the key is very simple. We need to have a collaborative, experiential, and outcome-based learning rather than the current method. And I've been practicing that for the last 28 years here. And in terms of the assessment, instead of keeping the focus on the midterm and the final end term exams, there should be continuous assessment of the progress students are making. And in my classes, I do not have any exams. I use 3 different areas to gauge their learning and understanding the subject matter, and they're assessing their knowledge. So the one is discussion forum. Every week they have to answer, each student answers online the one topic under discussion relevant to the topic covered for that week. And then they have to answer to 2 students and create the thread. And my role is to continue the thread and challenge them to think out of the box. That's one component for assessment. Second component is they read between 8 to 10 case studies or articles from top magazines like Harvard Business Review, MIT Sloan, McKinsey Quarterly, etc. They learn the concept about what industry is doing, and they focus on what are the 3 things. One, what key principles we are learning from the articles in the team setting. Secondly, can we bridge the gap between theory and the practice by each and every member of the team? And third, 2 or 3 key takeaways from the article. So this way they do a lot of introspection and reflection of reading the case studies for better knowledge and retention. And they write down 2-page simple summary. And the last thing is they have to work in a team to work on a live project. Through the semester, they write up the project report and then present it in the class. So with these 3 things as an assessment, no exams, I'm able to gauge whether they are learning something and able to put it in practice by working on the live project. So we need to rethink fundamentally the way we are teaching. One, collaborative, experiential, and outcome-based. That should be the focus. Change the assessment method from instead of focus on exams to continuous assessment. It will require more work, but it's worth it because students who get through this method of learning will have a better knowledge retained. They're able to take it forward because they've already practiced it in the class, and they will be very proficient once they start applying it at the workplace. So I'll put it at that level. Additional questions? Somebody has raised the hand, Ramanujam.
Yes, sir. Ramanujam, sir, you can please go ahead and ask your question.
So very good morning, sir. Am I audible?
Good morning.
Yes, yes.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for the opportunity. Under new education policy, there is a credit transfer, and also if the students unable to complete the credit for the BTech degree, they can offer with the required credit completion diploma or vocational kind of courses. Will it be easy to implement in Indian education system at the current policies?
Yes, actually, it is a part of the National Education Policy 2020. Over the next 15 years, all educational institutes starting from K through 12, as well as all the undergrad, grad, postgrad, all higher education institutes have to make an effort to implement that policy. The real challenge is, will it be done systematically? Will it be done on a standardized basis everywhere, or will it be a shotgun approach? And one of this time, I think we can do a special session on National Education Policy 2020 implementation. I have a prepared presentation on that, including what are some of the key challenges we are facing in India, because what I have been observing on the ground after sitting at the AICTE NEP 2020 Implementation Plan Committee, that the institutes are taking sort of pick and choose approach and more like a shotgun approach on things they would like to work on, rather than looking at it as a comprehensive policy which needs to be implemented systematically. And unless we do that, the benefits will not come, and it will not be there, because the policy is excellent. But that's, again, we are talking about planning effort, 10%. 90% effort should be on the execution of that policy on a systematic basis throughout all higher education institute, which I currently do not see it. Some institute which are having a great leadership and enlightened leaders are doing it, but others are just doing whatever they would like to do. And it's sort of a pity and a shame, because what we have proposed is that the highest level, the leadership and the administration, should be given a training on the importance of sustainability, leadership, talent management, project management, etc., community service effort importance. And all of these are the Atal FDP, emerging area FDP, they have listed. Some of those FDPs are delivered, but system-wide, if you look at all higher education institute, we are not able to reach them yet. The effort should be made to educate starting at the top level administration, and that includes all the top leadership up to the vice chancellor, director, principal level, etc. Then in the middle level, they need to be training department heads and deans who will be rolling out NEP 2020 in project management and in risk management. And at the faculty and student level, all soft skill program must be instituted. So this faculty development program is a very critical component. And unless we do that well, the NEP 2020 journey, which is a change management or transformation journey, will not be successful. So it's a questionable thing at the moment, but we need to continue the effort to engage all different levels, train them first, and then let them go forward and do it in a systematic basis. So I'll leave it at that with that comment.
Okay, sir. Thank you so much. I think that's all for the Q&A session. I would like respected Deputy Dean, sir, to do the vote of thanks for this.
Okay.
So before he comes in, my sincere request to you, Professor Vora, we will have the next eminent lecture series on the implementation of new educational.
Excellent. I'll be happy to do that.
We will do that. Okay, over to you, Professor.
Yeah. Thank you, sir. Sir, at the outset, I thank Professor Manu K. Vora for giving such an interesting and inspiring lecture. All the participants and the young minds who participated in this lecture would certainly take away not only two important, sir, many points for building their career. And I thank our Vice Chancellor, Professor V.S. Rao Garu, for kindly participating and also sharing the views on the lecture delivered by Dr. K. Vora. And sir, your words will certainly also inspire all the participants, and we all will follow to build our career and the institution career also. And I thank all the participants for registering and participating actively and asking questions and taking clarifications for all their questions. And I thank the ITKM team for flawlessly conducting and supporting in all technical aspects for this wonderful organization of this event. I thank all the participants once again, and last but not the least, I thank the Dean Academic and Faculty Affairs for formulating this event. And sir, we request you to bring such very interesting topics in future also, and we all will support and to build this university. Thank you all for participating in this meeting.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Okay.
Yeah, I'll be sharing the PowerPoint, this PDF file of my presentation as soon as the session is over. And Professor Pandaji, you can feel free to share it with everyone. That will be fine.
Okay, sir. Okay, sir. I'll definitely circulate to all my students as well as faculty community here in SRM. Also to all the participants, those who have attended this program also.
Thank you.
On behalf of the institute also, we'll also give a virtual certificate. I'll send to you in your email for this dedicated 2 hours for the institute. And in future also, we want to be connected with you for faculty development program actually, how to develop faculties, and by large also they can develop the students community for better placement and for higher education in top universities in USA, in management school as well as in other engineering branches of a master's and PhD in USA universities. So you want to take your advice and suggestion how we can go ahead. We have also international affair group is there working very hard for the enrollment of our students in the foreign top 100 universities in USA and other developed countries of the world also. So that in that connection also, we want also your support, how best we may be connected in future also. Sure. Thank you very much for sparing your valuable time, because it's quite late in the night also. You have spared your time. Thank you very much, and good night.
Yeah, good night. And I'll be delighted to work on different items you mentioned.
Yes,
and it'll be a pleasure because there is interest, and we can work together to make SRM AP the best in India.
Sir, yes, sir. Yes, sir. That is our interest.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Have a wonderful day.
Thank you. Bye. Goodbye. Sir. Goodbye.